honored by Professor Ahmed Mamdouh El-Sherif, Professor of Epidemiology and Infectious Diseases, the ex-head of Department of Veterinary Medicine, the ex-Vice Dean of Faculty of Veterinary Medicine, Bani Suef University, Egypt, presents today. All over the world, there are 4 disease causation models are important in understanding how the disease occur. Trade epidemiological model, web epidemiological model, wheel epidemiological model, and Rothman's component by causation model. Wheel epidemiological disease causation model. Character of wheel epidemiological disease causation model. This model, invented by Mosner and Karmer, 1985. This model emphasized the agent as the sole disease causation. This model emphasized the interplay of physical, biological, and social environments as a disease causation. This model discriminates between necessary and sufficient factors. Wheel model application is elucidate the disease causation. The term web of causation is often used to describe the complex of web of interacting factors involving agents. Different agents here are infectious, nutritive, chemical, physical, and or genetic. Infectious agents are the most essential causative factors for any disease. Bacteria with their all types, viral with their all families and kingdoms, parasites, either ecto, endo, or blood parasites, the prion, that called bovine spongiform encephalopathy, and like that in several animals, and it occur also in human, that caused embargo on meat from USA, UK, and several European countries at 1995. The rickettsia was its causative agent of fatal diseases. Also the poisonous creature which cause several damage in the animal farms or in human population, especially in rural areas. The important factors linked to infectious agents. Number 1, adaptability. That's mean they pervade, spreading throughout of any pathogen through the hosts. Then the host range means that any pathogen can infect more than one host in the same time, human, animals, birds, and so on. We also note the virulence. That's mean the ability of any infectious agent to infect or damaging the hosts. The pathogenicity means the mechanism of causing a disease or interacting with normal work of system or organ in the body. ID50 means the minimal infective dose. This is a traditionally term used for bacteria which contaminate food or feed stuffs. That's mean food for human being or feed for animal populations to cause infection. Number of bacteria measured by the concentration of bacteria multiplied by the mass. Also, LD50, it is the measuring of the lethal dose of pathogen or the toxin of pathogen or the toxin of any chemical agent, as well as radiation that required to kill the half the numbers of a tested population post to a specified time of duration. All these factors are lineage to the infectious agent for causing a disease. Nutritive agent. This deals with or discusses the deficiencies of vitamins, minerals, protein, and so on, as well as increases in particles of nutrition, such as cholesterol, sugar, sodium chloride, and etc. Or searching for presence of poisoning food. This nutritive agents may lead to overweight due to over and excess presence of them in the animal or human feed or foodstuffs. Chemical agents which play as a factor in disease occurrence, such as carbon monoxide poisoning, drugs abusing, and use of a different medications in illegal or permissible limits. Important factors linked to chemical agents. Toxic dose. A toxic dose means the degree to which a chemical substance or a mixture of these chemical substances can damage the host or some organs in this host. Penetratability, it means that the susceptibility of being penetrated or passage through a partition, and this used for chemicals materials. Stability, it means that a chemical substance can be in a dynamic equilibrium with its environment to produce its effect. Half-life, the term required for a chemical quantities for reduction to a half of its virulence. Physical agents such as the noise, the vibration produced by different instruments, artificial optical radiation from different chemicals or systems, electromagnetic fields coming from or during some experiments, ionizing radiation, and electrical equipments. All of them are important in action of a disease. Important factors linked to physical agents. These are compositions, magnitude, and exposure time. They are important in determining how and when and why the disease will be occur. Genetic agents are important for occurrence of several diseases, such as monogenic mutations that results in sickle cell anemia, polygenic mutations such as the cancers in the GIT, chromosomal mutations which cause color change in certain breeds of cattle. Important factors linked to genetic agent are family, species, and breeds, as some of them linked to some genetic disease and others are not. The herd behavior in animal population may link it to genetic agent, and then exposure to various factors during pregnancy and life in general, such as smoking, Zika virus, or coronavirus. Hosts are important to influence an individual risk of exposure to any agent. This includes different animal species and families and sexes, as well as different population with their segments in human beings. Also, they are important to measure the effect on susceptibility and exposure to any agent, as some species and families are more susceptible than others for disease occurrence. Factors that influence host individual risk of exposure to different diseases. Number one, the age. Some diseases, such as foot and mouth disease, cause deaths in young calves, while in adults it only causes clinical symptoms. Corona infection in elders cause 60% of death rate, while in youth it's about 30% of appearance of the clinical symptoms. In infant with Kawasaki syndrome for about 10% of affections. The race. White race, black race, it is an old synonyms for disease occurrence such as tuberculosis. And the epidemiologist found that the economical status is the most controllable in this factor. The sex of the population or of the animal, such as female cattle, more showing brucellosis than the male, and this is due to the husbandry system. The breeds. Some cattle breeds showing color changes due to genetic factor. The purpose of domestication. Purpose of domestication such as breeding for fattening or breeding of taking a new generation of certain breeds give different stages and names and pathogenesis by means that different diseases. Feeding habits or foods habits and its production leads to different affection, such as giving harsh feed in a cattle herd may lead to increased percentage of lumpy jaw disease, while increased rate of lipids in the foodstuff of the persons leads to heart attacks or obesity. Breeding practices and social status with their economic involvement of the breeding purpose or economical status and socio level of education and life in the persons control occurrence of certain diseases. Factors that affect on susceptibility and exposure to different diseases in animals or human being population. Number one, genetic composition of certain families, breeds, and races make them more resistant or susceptible to occurrence of certain diseases. Number 2, the nutrition status of the animal or human affect its well-being and resistance to occurrence of certain diseases or susceptibility to it, such as occurrence of struck disease in flushed sheep before beasts are as a nutritional factor for occurrence of these clostridial organisms. The immunologic status of the animal or human is a factor important in susceptibility and exposure to certain diseases, such as vaccinated population in human being against tuberculosis is more protected from tuberculosis than those haven't. Also, vaccinated cattle against foot and mouth disease with serotypes endemic in their environment is more protected from these serotypes if it's distributed between non-vaccinated cattle. Anatomical structure of certain animals, such as the esophageal groove in calves, if we fed them from the bottle, occurrence of enteritis due to non-digested bulk of milk or curd of milk occur in the rumen, not going to the apomasum. Presence of other diseases will help occurrence of certain diseases, such as infestation with external parasites like ticks, make the animal more available or more frequent for occurrence of blood parasites. Purpose of domestication of animals. Mastitis is a disease of farms husbanded for milking, not for fattening. So, purpose of domestication is a factor for susceptibility of certain diseases. Presence of other medications such as cortisone injection with high level and long term may lead to fungal infection. Methods of rearing and husbandry. Open method can cause certain diseases other than the closed system. Closed system may lead to occurrence of tuberculosis, while opening system may lead to jaundice disease. Practices and psychological makeup. Certain people segments, such as scientists of biology, are exposed more for infection by different pathogens. Environmental factors that affect by increasing or decreasing level of diseases, such as physical, biological, and socio-economical factors. Physical environmental factors such as air. When contaminated air causes respiratory tract infections or cancers. Contaminated water leads to diarrhea, dysentery, hepatitis, or amoebiasis. Soil contamination may lead to lead poisoning, mercury poisoning, leukemia, and other skin problems such as ringworms. Housing factor may lead to respiratory infection such as tuberculosis, skin infections such as ringworm. Radiation may lead to leukemia or chromosomal mutation with genetic diseases. The climate, heat cramps, respiratory problems. Noise and light leads to fatigue, deafness, annoyance, psychological effect such as blindness. Presence of the waste in the environment may lead to chemical poisoning. Radioactive hazards leads to genetic problems, skin problems, and GIT problems. Biological environment. It is an important factor includes microorganisms such as endo and ectoparasites, bacteria, viruses which lead to different diseases either in human being populations or animal populations. External insects or parasites also cause several diseases. Surrounding animals such as man, birds, plants, or any living may cause zoonosis to the some diseases such as rabies, yellow fever, and plague. Plants and ecological organisms may lead to fungal infection poisoning. So, biological environmental factor is an important factor for occurrence of several of diseases. Socioeconomic factors including crowding, which leads to some diseases if the animals are crowded in their places, such as tuberculosis, Jaundice disease, salmonellosis, and ringworm. Sanitation. Unhygienic conditions may lead to occurrence of different blood parasites, leptospirosis, and listeriosis. Availability of health service and veterinary service as presence of a lot of vaccination, permissible to easy of treatment, and surgical operation may lead to increase or decrease the animal productivity, human health. Example 4. Wheel epidemiological disease causation. The host is the cattle, and the disease is foot and mouth disease, local epidemics in Africa. There is 3 main environments. Social environment as socioeconomic status due to poverty and low of education of most of African people. They are not believe in vaccination or in test and slaughter or in veterinary assistant as supporting for get rid of this disease. Purpose of rearing. Purpose of rearing of most of cattle in Africa is for wealth and introduce the cattle as a gift to their bride, and little is reared as intensive production for fattening and or milking. Veterinary assistant is of low minority in most of African countries. The biological environment is the presence of serotypes, as some countries have A, B, and C. Some countries have O, SAT1, SAT2, and so on. Also, by vaccination program in some countries not cope with the disease occurrence. Hygienic level in most of African countries in case of individual rearing is very low. Newly importation of living countries is usually occur, and this leads to bringing of new serotypes of foot and mouth disease, causing local epidemics. The physical environment include the cattle breeds. All the cattle breeds are susceptible to all serotypes of foot and mouth disease. Immunological status, if it is vaccinated, it will be high to certain serotypes vaccinated for, but if newly importation of living animal with newly serotypes coming, the immunological status will be 0. Animal health status is very low in most of African countries due to the social and biological environment as described before. So, disease of foot and mouth happened as local epidemics in Africa due to the several causes said here, not for only the serotypes of foot and mouth disease virus. Epidemiology to be continued. Please subscribe the channel for following up the rest of epidemiology series.